Right. Notepad's at the ready, so they say. Let's have a go and let's see if I can give you an enjoyable hour talking about picture books and little bits about how they work and things like that. I'll try and keep my eye and voice wherever they should be and try and share as much as possible. Thank you again. Across the top and across the bottom, you can see lots of books, and they are mainly most of the books that I'll be using to talk about the codes and the principles through this session. I did a talk through before and it was too long, so I've cut loads out, and there's still more I should have cut out really, but haven't, so I'll try and keep it quick. I've got a clock next to me, but as a teacher I generally was really bad at keeping time, so let's see how I do. You can just tell me off in chat. A special thank you also to my friend Nikki, who is managing the whole thing. Really kind of him to do this and give up his time so that I can just talk to you, and hopefully nothing will break. Hopefully you can see everything now and you can hear me. So very, very briefly, because I don't want to spend too long on it because it's a session in itself, I just wanted to kind of clarify what I mean when I'm personally talking about picture book with one word. Let's see if I can find it here, or a picture book or an illustrated book. And I'm treading here on very sensitive ground, I think, in the picture book kind of community of critics that talk about it. And actually there's a convention only a few years ago where they had a discussion about what do we mean by a picture book and an illustrated book. But it's important to know so that you can understand why the pictures are doing what they're doing. So I keep looking like I'm looking sideways. I'll just try and keep on. So why have I written down picture book as one word, and why is it written down as one word sometimes and two words at other times, and an illustrated book at other times? Well, they are three different things doing three different formats doing three different things. So firstly, picture books are generally, a book that are a sequence of illustrations, and picture books with the one word generally have very little words. Sometimes we have wordless picture books which will have maybe a title on the front and then a title page, maybe blurb on the back, and that's generally mostly it. Although The Three Pigs has words inside it, and that's a wordless picture book, and yet there's a conversation. But with picture books, images, I've written down images carry as much of the narrative. This is Perry Nodelman, but I think I might also argue that it's a two-way thing really. The words do a lot of the lifting as well, but cleverly pictures can do very special things. And then what happens is with picture books as one word, the reader is invited to look at the play between the words and the pictures and make the connection. And we call this the read-reading gap, because the disconnect between what the words are saying and what the pictures are saying can be quite big. And so it's for the reader to join those two elements together, or see how they're playing off against each other and either get the humor or make the meaning. And that's why I've got a picture of a battery. I like to think of, I usually would have a battery here, but I don't. But I like to think of the words being at one end of the battery and the images being at the other end of the battery, and the picture book as one word. The meaning is only made when the reader connects both elements of the battery together. Otherwise, some element of the meaning is lost. So if you remove the pictures and only have the words, a lot of the meaning is lost. I'm going to model that in a moment because this is an interesting idea to take in. And yeah, and if you removed the words and only have the pictures, some meaning is lost as well. And I think with illustrated books, here we go. Here's an illustrated book. It's The Gentle Giant by Michael Morpurgo. Just quickly to jump in, yes, no webcams, yes, muted, but there will be opportunities, hopefully, to talk at the end where I can unmute you. The reason I've done that is just lots of rumours about people jumping in on Zoom, and it can get really noisy, so that's why. So back to this illustrated book. This is Gentle Giant. Michael Form has illustrated it, but if you were to read the words, you can see that the picture isn't really required. Instead, it might aid us with being able to see what's going on, or a great word is embellish the image. And picture books generally are in the format of a picture book, so 32 pages, there's words and pictures. But I would argue that maybe some picture books, the pictures are really just embellishing the words, and there might be a lot of words on the page, and they could do with taking a bit of a back step and letting the pictures do some of the talking. And I don't really want pages from picture, two separate words, picture books, saying that these are what's happening, because that's not what I want to do. But if you just think of picture book as one word, means they're both working equally to tell the story. Sometimes the picture might be doing it a bit more, and sometimes the words, but very rarely in a picture book. And where the picture book is two separate words, maybe it's a 50-50, but sometimes I find that the illustration, the narrative, the writing is doing a little bit of the carrying a little bit more, and certainly in illustrated books. Again, I'm an enthusiast and not an expert in that, and as I say, there's big discussions still about what they are, but I need you to know that, because I'll model why in a moment, because we're going to focus so much on what the pictures do with the telling. So if I put this up, you will probably recognize the story. What I'm doing with you here is like the very first session I had as a training student at Westminster College, which is now Oxford Brookes. Maurice did this one with us. But if you were to read that, I'm guessing that most of you know this story, and we can see that it's one, yes, absolutely, Mr. D, Rosie's Walk. So we can see that it's one sentence, and it's about 32 words. So let's go back. We're saying that the words in the pictures work together to tell a story. So Rosie the hen went for a walk across the yard, around a pound, over the haycock, past the mill, through the fence, under the beehives, and got back in time for dinner. So that's what the words are telling us. There's the words. Rosie the hen went for a walk. At the moment, you might argue that although we find out it's a yard, this picture lets us know that the yard is part of a farm. So it embellishes in that way, but there's nothing new here that's going to really bring some extra information that changes everything. And then across the yard, so now something very clever is going on. We have got the words doing one thing, Rosie the hen went for a walk across the yard, and then we've got the images doing something totally different and telling us a different story. So there's almost like a dual narrative going on. And this is probably a child's very earliest introduction to irony, where we are in on a joke and maybe Rosie isn't, or maybe the writing isn't, we don't know. I always like to think that Rosie knows what's going on and that it's a big setup, but I think Pat Hutchins has been recorded saying she doesn't know. But you know, I'm allowed to think what I think. So with picture books, one word, there is this interplay between what the pictures are saying and what the words are playing. And sometimes they complement each other. And sometimes there can be a joyful play where the words all step back and then let there be a little secret joke in what's happening in the pictures. And sometimes the pictures can completely contradict what the words are saying. And we've got a great example of that with the three pigs later on. So that's a good example of what we're talking about. So this is a picture book, yeah, an illustrated book I would see as a book with lots of writing, lots of words, and pictures there to just complement the words, really. So let's see an example where the pictures and the words are telling two slightly different stories. So does anyone know what this book is from? Trixie helped her daddy put the laundry into the machine. If you've seen me talk, you probably know what this is from. Thank you very much. Mr. D is sharp tonight. This is from Nuffle Bunny. So let's have a look at the words. Trixie helped her daddy put the laundry into the machine. Trixie helped her daddy put the laundry into the machine. Hopefully some of you are smiling at this picture because I love this one. Maybe Trixie thinks she's helping her daddy put the laundry into the machine, but to me it looks like she's wearing a sock and waving her mother's bra and wearing someone's jeans on her head. She's having a great time, whatever the case. But I don't know if she's helping. Maybe she thinks she's helping. Dad seems to find it funny, which is great. So again, in a picture book, we can see that this is interplay going on. So that was just a little dip into what we mean by a picture book. And we could do a whole session on that, and it would be interesting, but that's not what this session is about. It's about codes and principles of how pictures work. So two comments that I always share whenever I do this talk. One is by Sean Tan on the left, and then the other one is by the extremely wonderful Margaret Meek. And Sean Tan has said, well, you can see what he says. You want to invite the reader through the door without telling them where they are. This is what he sees and does when he's writing stories with his art. And Margaret Meek says reading doesn't happen in a vacuum. Now, if this is a session, I'd say, okay, talk to the person next to you. Let's have some thoughts and ideas. But we're not going to do that because I'm 10 minutes in and I want to get through all the sessions. But really, it's something to think about, because what both of these people are doing is they're telling you their own principles and their own ideas about what happens when we're reading, or what we're inviting readers to do. So we've got Sean Tan, the illustrator, the artist, and he's pretty much telling us that when he's putting something down on paper in art form or in written form, he does not want to tell the reader or the beholder, as Jane Doonan says, everything. He wants to leave gaps so that they can start working things out. And I think that's why when I first used to read Sean Tan, I used to get, I wouldn't say aggravated, but it was a challenge, because things like The Rules of Summer is such an odd book that it took me a long time to try to piece together what I thought the pictures were saying to me. And that's really something exciting. Same with Maurice Sendak, you know, all his picture books challenge me in different ways. And Molly Bang says at the beginning of a book that children come up with the most wonderful interpretations of books that allow for those readerly gaps, is what we call them, those gaps between the words and the pictures. And the reason I've got Mobius's name next to that is because what Mobius's codes do, we're going to look at them tonight, is they offer us a toolkit for looking at where we are when we walk through that door. That's probably a nice way of putting it. So he's providing us with a toolkit. And then Margaret Meek tells us that reading doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's one of my favourite statements about reading. And to me, I interpret this as what we bring to whatever it is that we're reading, whether it's a sentence or whether it's an image. And all our interpretations are going to be completely different depending on whether we're from New Zealand. I saw someone was here from New Zealand, incredible, or Nigeria or London, and whatever our backgrounds and whatever we've read or experienced. When we come to a picture, we're going to bring something different. And usually we spend a bit of time looking at some Anthony Brown images and look at them together and think about how we interpret them. But what's important in that, and how this relates to tonight, is Molly Bang in her book, Picture This. She talks about our emotional engagement with pictures and why it is we engage emotionally with some pictures in specific ways. So we've got Mobius Toolkit, Molly Bang, emotions. And that's the way we're going to look at picture books tonight. So that's like my preamble. It was over 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. Ofsted would be furious. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at William Mobius's picture book codes, and we're going to look at Molly Bang's picture book principles, and we're going to use them together to look at a load of pictures from picture books. And I'm going to go at quite a pace because I don't want to go slow. I don't want you falling asleep. You know, it's 8:15, so I want to keep it snappy. But what's important is to know where I'm coming from in this whole talk. So this book here, Peter Hunt's Children's Literature Development and Criticism. In here is William Mobius's or Jean Girard's essay on picture book codes. Now, Jean Girard, very quickly, is a French artist, and he did work for things like heavy metal, loads of graphic novels, and you know, he's revered by George Lucas. All graphic novelists think he's just this incredible person, and he is. And then Molly Bang is a celebrated picture book illustrator and writer, and her book, Picture This, which is the only book tonight I'm going to advise you to get. Basically, if you get any book, don't buy it on Kindle. You kind of have to get this one. You don't have to get it, but it's wonderful. And some of the images in Molly's book, you can see I've used throughout. So any images that you see like this, they're not mine, they're Molly's. Sometimes I've amended them slightly to fit what I'm looking at, but it's an incredible guide on how we and why we interpret pictures in certain ways. And when I've previously done this talk, I've only really talked about Mobius, and I realised that I've learned so much on Molly Bang that it's right that she takes equal stage, so words and pictures working together equally. What's interesting about Molly is she was an award-winning illustrator before she wrote Picture This. And she was winning awards, and she's like, but I don't really get how art and pictures work. So she stopped, and she did a lot of painting classes. She took a degree in art psychology, and she worked a lot with children and drawing and making shapes. And the culmination of all of that is Picture This. So she's saying, look, I won a load of awards with pictures. I don't really know what I was doing. So I went back to basics and started to find out what I was doing, which is fascinating. When I used to talk about Picturebook codes, these are the 5 headings that I used. These are Mobius's headings, so position, size and diminishing returns, perspective and viewpoint, framing, line and shape and color. Shape and viewpoint were things I personally added to that list. Molly Bang doesn't use any of those headings. She uses 10 principles, which are in her book. And I've kind of embedded her principles under Mobius's headings. So there we go. The disclaimer I want to make before we kind of go in is, at the end there is a blog and there's a little kind of handout. For the love of Cliff, don't ever think of that handout, that like the list of position and perspective and all those things, as a checklist for talking through with children. That would just kill the experience completely. They're both described as providing us with a grammar for reading pictures, and it would be like endless spagging of pictures, which would be horrible. Instead, just see it as a way for giving children tools and you tools for reading pictures. So hopefully in this, like, thank you very much. I quite like the disclaimer too. They both make it clear though. They both make it really clear we don't want to kill the joy of looking at pictures using these. Instead, we're trying to give you different lenses in which to look at pictures and why we respond to pictures emotionally the way we do. So that's thanks to Molly, really, and Mobius provides us with a toolkit. So there we go. Okay, so I've now changed it though, having come back and read all the work again, ready for this webinar. I read it and then just thought, oh my goodness, there's so much I didn't really get first time round in reading Molly and Mobius's work. So it's still position, size and diminishing returns, and it's still perspective and viewpoint, but now it's frame and the right and round. And I'd removed the right and round from Mobius's statement and just clonked it in shape with line. And I realized how stupid that was. I hadn't really read carefully what he was saying, and now I love what he's saying. And then I've now added line and capillarity and then color. So that's it. That's like the bare bones of the introduction. They're the things that we're looking at in pictures. Hopefully the next 40 minutes will kind of blow your mind a little bit. It did me when I first started seeing it in Molly's book and read Mobius's work. I should say all of this began when I was doing my MA at Roehampton in visual text. That's where I got access to these texts. Mary Roach, by the way, has got an extremely good Padlet. Go and ask her on Twitter where it is, where she's got a huge list of these kind of works. And the other book that I cite is Looking at Pictures and Picturebooks by Jane Doonan, which is published by Nancy and Aidan Chambers' Thimble Press. And there's lots I bring in from Jane's book too, Viewpoint and Shape especially. Okay, come on, let's go. So we're going to look at position and size, and this format is, I'll use a picture from Jane Doonan's book and talk about it, and then we'll apply that to Picturebooks, and hopefully that will give us a tool for understanding how pictures work. So let's start. There's a red triangle, there's a white background, and there's 5 or 6 black lines, maybe 7 actually. If I was to say to you, yeah, of course, yeah, share away on Twitter. If I was to say to you, what fairy tale is this from? Can someone type in very quickly what they think it's from? Stephen, Connor, that was extremely quick. Thank you very much. And everyone else that joined in, yes, thank you. So isn't it incredible that I gave you a tiny bit of information and you already knew, thanks Cass Nichols for putting that in the QA, that this is Red Riding Hood. So let's pretend that red is the red triangle, and you've probably worked out that the black lines, the vertical lines are trees. Now already, that is very interesting that as a people, we can interpret symbols and shapes and already say, we know what these are symbolizing. Now I know we take this for granted, we do this every day, but the main thing to know about with pictures here, and this is what Molly Bang talks about, is when someone's on the left-hand side of a picture in a picture book, it means that they're starting on a journey. So when you're here on the left-hand side, you're starting on a journey. And that's because in Western literature, it's the safe place, it's the starting point. Think about when we're reading a book, we start in the top left, and then we move across and we turn the page and we start on top left again. With Eastern literature, it's different. They'll start the other way around. But for us, we're starting on a journey, and it's safe there. It's also a place that's stagnant in a picture. You can't really move on. It's a long way across the picture plane to help us turn the page. But we're secure as well. So here we are in Aaron Becker's journey, where it's happening. Okay, so you can see here that the little girl is on the left-hand side in both of the pictures, and she's beginning that journey at 2 different points. So she goes through like several mini journeys in journey, but she's on that far left side starting off. So that's one thing to know about picture books and characters. They start on that side. Here's Max and his red boat. You can see the theme of red, and her red boat and his red boat. There is a really good reason why Where the Wild Things Are is as lauded as it is. Max looks a bit cross, and you can see that his terrain is different to the terrain that the Wild Things are. And we feel, because he's on that very far left-hand side, that his journey is going to take a bit longer and possibly be a bit more challenging than this character's. This character's got to go into that huge city, but we're excited about that city. And this character has got to get past the wild things, these kind of little monsters or large monsters that are there waiting for us. Sendak actually tells us that they're based on his aunts and uncles who used to say when he was a little boy and go around, you know, oh, you're so gorgeous, I want to eat you up. And, you know, there's that kind of message in there. Anyway, there we go. So here's the same picture as this one, but what I've done is I've moved the trees about a bit, made them bigger, and shrunk the red triangle a little bit and knocked it down. And again, this is in Molly's book. This isn't my work. This is me moving some of Molly. I don't know Molly, by the way. I wish I did. But for ease, I'm just going to say Molly. And there's a few things going on here, but the main thing to know about now is her size, because we're talking about position and size. So here she's low down and the forest looks bigger and it looks more threatening. And it's simply been done by shrinking that triangle and making the trunks of the black lines bigger. I think it's really interesting that these things happen. So here we can see Francesca Sanna employing that device in the journey. So you've got this family of refugees who are trying to escape a war-torn country that they've been living in. The father has died in a war in some way. And here we've got the mother and the 2 children. And you can see, much like Molly's picture, you've got these vertical trees stopping us progressing. You've got this wall that's stopping us progressing. And the characters are really far left. These are bikes down here, looking up at this huge journey that they've got to make from left to right. Now, you can imagine that this would feel very different if we could see the tops of the trees or if the characters were bigger. We'd feel they stood more of a chance. So this is all about Francesca Sanna possibly trying to make us feel like the journey from one side of the page to the other side is a long journey. So this is something that illustrators might use. It's worth knowing at this point that this is called the gutter, this middle part, and we talk about traveling to and from the gutter. At the back of Jane's book is a brilliant glossary of technical terms. I could do a session just on technical terms. It'd be really interesting, I think. Okay, so what happens if we've gone left and then we're right? Well, Mobius tells us that the right-hand side is a place of excitement and adventure and energy and risk. So it can be a great place, but also because we don't know what's coming next on the next page, where we can be a little bit nervous, and characters can too. You'll see lots of picture book writers use ellipsis, you know, the 3 dots to kind of indicate that they want us to turn the page to kind of build up that excitement too. So here it is in Anthony Brown's The Tunnel. And you can see that she's on the far right-hand side. She's looking behind herself. We've got the swish of movement, but she's in this area of risk, being chased by we don't know what, but we've got the classic Scooby-Doo, you know, characters in the wood. I do a really lovely thing on Intertext actually, and where these images come from, but it's fine, we can move on. But we get the idea that she's being chased, and it's heightened more by the fact that she's not in this area of safety over here anymore. She's right over here, and we want to turn the page over quickly to find out that she's okay. And here we have it with Rob Biddulph's Blown Away with Penguin Blue. He's also moving, journeying from left to right, just as Max did in his boat. Penguin Blue's doing it in a red dinghy. We like red transport, apparently, in Picturebooks. But Penguin Blue and his friends are over on the right-hand side, that kind of element of risk. It doesn't feel like they're in danger to me. It looks like they're having quite a good time in some way. I wonder how much, though, is affected by the polar bear kind of weighing it all down, whether this is helpful having him on this side of the plane. It'd be interesting. So that's some element. And then what happens if the character is in center stage? If they take the center stage? Well, Molly Bang tells us that when we read any picture, whether it's hung up in a gallery or on a page, no matter where things are, we are always drawn to the center. And if things are off center, it affects the way we read something. So the center of attention is there for a reason. And Molly Bang's great at using these idioms and these phrases that we use and saying, look, we use them for a reason. They're telling us something about who we are as a people. So here we've got the young boy in John Light and Lisa Evans as the flower. He's possibly the smallest character on the page, but he's got some color, and he's the person whose face we can see, but also we're instantly drawn to him because Lisa Evans has very cleverly centralized him and used the people around to almost be kind of like a mini frame. So we're drawn right into him, even though he is the smallest. And you can see that he's looking towards the right as if to say, go on, turn the page, everyone, I want to know what's going to happen next. And then we've got red here kind of dominating the page, right in our faces. And anyone that knows Anthony Brown's Zoo, here we go with Dad. We use this picture a lot tonight, but he is the center of attention here too. And Mobius talks about the fact that when someone is the center of attention and big, it doesn't mean that they are good or strong. It can mean an overblown ego. And someone's just mentioned about the psychology of Picturebooks. Well, here we are. So something I noticed, right, I've looked at this picture book for, I reckon, since it first came out with kids. And I was looking at it, I was talking about it with Nick Swarbrick, and we both noticed that if you really look at Dad, he looks like he's lying down rather than standing up. And I noticed that, do you know the kind of image in Stephen Hawking's is like the universe in a nutshell? This is a random comment, isn't it? But it shows like a planet bending time and bending gravity. And it looks like the clouds are being bent by the weight of his presence. You can see they're kind of arching down. So he dominates a lot as well. He's kind of drawing us in, and no matter how much we want to look away, we can't. He controls that picture, and illustrators can use that. Think about where we are placed. We'll go into that a little bit more in a moment, to affect the way we feel about something. And then, of course, when you're on the right-hand side and your quest is finished, so we had the little girl and Max going off on a quest from left to right. Well, in Picturebooks, when your quest is finished, you go from right to left and you head back. So Max is doing that here in his boat. Off he goes. Can you see also, anyone that's got a copy of Where the Wild Things Are, just while I remember about frames, can you see how the frame here is this big? It's like, what, 3/4 almost of the whole double page spread. Have a look at these frames and what happens before Max has his wild rumpus and afterwards. They are beautifully symmetrical. It's a moment of absolute genius from Sendak. So anyway, right to left when you finished your quest. Right to left when you finished your quest. Right to left when you finished your quest. And just to prove the point about how we read pictures and how it feels like when they're on the left-hand side, they're looking right, they're going on a quest, I flipped this picture to show how it feels. Starting on a quest, coming back from a quest, voyage and return. Hopefully you can see how that works. It's quite interesting. Someone's just asked, is there a list of books available at the end? So I'll quickly jump in with, there is, it's on the blog. Okay, and finally for this section, Diminishing Returns. That is when a character is on one page repeatedly, and the more they're on it, the less power they have. That's the diminishing return element. So this is from the marvelous Fluffy Squishy Itty Bitty, an incredible book set somewhere in France. And Eddie, she is looking out for a present for her mum, and she goes to all of these shops looking for a present for her mum, has absolutely no luck. And at the end she says the butcher was her last hope. So the more she's in this picture, the less power she has. And when we turn the page, she's really down and dejected. And that's what a diminishing return is. This is Mobius. They actually both talk about it, but Mobius talks about it quite explicitly. And then this is from Molly's book, where she has read over an edge, but I've added in a cliff and water and spiky bits for something later on. And here we've got a diminishing return of red falling from the cliff and into the water. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just copying a picture from Molly Bang's thing, I promise. I've got her on the beach just to make you feel okay. But this is from Arthur and the Golden Rope. So this is diminishing return. Arthur is on a quest. A giant cat wakes up and sees that he's trying to do something. So the cat chases Arthur. Arthur is made to fall off the cliff into the water, but Todd Staunton obviously feels kind enough to have Arthur on a beach at the end, so that we're not all too worried about it. So diminishing return is the final bit of that first code, where the more you're in a picture, the more energy you're expending and the less power you have at the end. Phew. Okay, if this was longer, I'd say go get a cup of tea and we'll move on to the next one. But now we're going to be on perspective and viewpoint. Before I begin, this whole thing is being videoed and it'll be up on a YouTube channel, and I'll put it at the end of my blog as well so that you can watch it at your own leisure. All right, so perspective and viewpoint. So from this moment, I'm going to talk mainly about the use of horizons in Picturebooks and no horizon. So, you know, we use horizons in ourselves to see that there's a new opportunity, a chance of escape, something over the horizon, that kind of idea. Molly Bang picks up a lot on this, an awful lot. So here's red in the woods. You can see that there's a depth that seems to go on forever and ever and ever. And if I add a horizon, suddenly the whole thing feels very different. We feel that it's the kind of the woods have an ending to it. It's limited and there's a chance for her to escape. So this is what horizons do. They give us the sense that there's a chance of moving on and escaping from a situation. Without one, they can feel trapped, confined. So here's a good example of it in The Journey again. So this is Francesca Sanna again. This is the whole frame, by the way. And you can see that there are hills in the background, but we can't really see a horizon at all. And that's to show the feeling that, remember, they're escaping, the feeling that they're still nowhere near getting away. And you've even got the frame of the car to show that they're trapped in that way too. Mum's looking back, the girl's maybe looking at the mum or the brother's trying to look forward. But the whole car dominates that frame as if to say they're still boxed in. And that phrase boxed in is powerful too. So no horizon line, sense of being trapped. Here we are later on, where we've got them here, small as they were before, but higher up. And if you're higher up, it means you've got a little bit more chance of having some power and some excitement. And this time we have got a horizon line, and you can see that unbelievably clever. Francesca Sanna's kind of got a triangle here going on where it points us towards this new horizon, new beginnings. And you've got, again, the little red boat here waiting to take them away. So the last one is Viewpoint. This one is Jane Doonan. I don't think Molly Bang and Mobius talk about this too much. And it's something that Mary Sutcliffe, as a lecturer, said to me early on, and it blew my mind, which was when we first read, in the very first session we ever did, Where the Wild Things Are, she said, in this picture, and who is Max looking at here? I hadn't ever thought about this before, and it really knocked me, and that is Max is looking at us. The reader. And Jane Doonan talks about when the character in the frame is looking at us, then they're inviting us to go on the journey with them. And as you can see, he's at our eye level. So, you know, if we were in that picture, we're possibly on a shoreline because there's a tree there to the left, or maybe we're in a boat as well. But he's smiling and looking at us saying, come on, I'm ready for you to join me on this adventure. So when they're looking at us and they're at our eye line, it's an invitation. Here it is in Coming Away from the Water, Shirley. You could argue that Shirley's slightly looking to our right, maybe, but the dog's looking at us. But she's going off in a boat as well. There is a theme, isn't there? Going Off with Children and Adventures is a wonderful book. And here she is at the end, looking at us. She's had her day's fun while her mum and dad have been dozing on the deck chairs, and she's heading back. So that idea of viewpoint and eye line is important. Here it is with Dad, where we're looking up at Dad. This is Molly Bang using that phrase again. Here, looking up can mean in admiration, but we're definitely not admiring Dad at all. We're made to look up at him because he is in a position of power. So as I said earlier, if we're having to look up at someone, then they have more power over us. And then I noticed it today. I added it in the slide when, God blimey, it happens in Gorilla too. And this time we're looking down at the girl. We can't see her face, but she's got less power because we, as the reader, are looking down at her. And we're having to look slightly up at Dad, so he's got the most power in this frame. And here with Peter, we're looking down at Peter, he's looking down, he's feeling down. Again, Molly Bang talks about this idea of, you know, if you're low in the page, down in the dumps, feeling down. If you're high up, high as a kite, you know, feeling on top of the world, all those kind of things. Those are phrases that we've picked up and that we use. What I love about this with Ezra Jack Keats is how the dip and the curve in the snow draws our eye line to Peter looking down. But it's a nice curve. And don't worry, you know, he's having a threat. He's not kind of winning a snowball fight with the bigger boys. And you can see that his progress is a big one too. But here he is later on in his bath. And in terms of Viewpoint, where are we now? Well, we're pretty low down. We're like lying on the floor of the bathroom, I think. But you can see, oh, thank you. It looks like there's something, hopefully someone will manage some of the talk that's going on there. But you can see that Peter is looking back. So a bit like Max going back on his journey and Shirley, Peter's looking back at his day and he's now higher than us, which means that he's in a position of power, he's secure and he's happy. And we've got these lovely warm colours to make that clear as well. I wonder whose red boat that might have been. And then here with Bigu, one of the final ones on Viewpoint, we are again almost at her level. What's interesting about Bigu, by the way, is whenever we share this with students, how many students take it for granted all the way through, even though it says it, that Bigu is male, but Bigu's a she. I just find it fascinating that we associate Bigu with being a male straight away. But we can see that the physicality of Alexis Deacon's images here show how much Bigu is feeling, and we can associate with those feelings just through some shapes and some movement. But think about where we are here as well. Bigu is very small. We are adult readers, but we're at the same height as her in order to engage emotionally with how it must feel being that small and asking to be picked up. And then the final bit on Viewpoint, which kind of knocked me for six, which I think is in a Doonan again, is when we can't see a character's face, then the illustrator is inviting us to experience and think about what those characters are feeling. So in this one, Yoshio is looking out onto the streets of Tokyo and he's going out on a trip to school. But you can see that the world that he's in at the moment is white, but the world outside is colourful. And he looks, we've got to think about how he might be feeling. Is he excited? He looks excited. Is he a bit nervous about what's going on because of the rain maybe? We don't know, but we are certainly invited to feel. When we can't read someone's face, we're certainly put on edge. And so we try to find ways of trying to understand what they're feeling. And that's what's invited here in Anthony Brown's picture too. We can't see what the girl is thinking. We can't see what the dad is thinking. And so it's a way of inviting us to consider those emotions. I don't think we'll have time, but this is going to be one of the pictures that we're going to talk about later on. So that's that section. I'm going to take a drink of water because I've talked for a long time. I'm so sorry. There we go. Okay, and then on to framing. Hopefully you guys are still with me and everything's going okay. So frame and the right and round and what do they mean? Thank you, by the way, for sticking with me. So framing in picture books I absolutely love. You can see here in Anthony Brown that he has framed this picture from the tunnel between the brother and the sister in a kind of thin black frame. And I think framing like this is a bit like having a cathode ray, you know, CRT TV, the old school TVs, or a frame with a TV with a thick frame, and watching Lord of the Rings. So you can see that it's an immersive experience, but you're kind of that one step remove. And that's what it feels like. And what's happening here is the illustrator wants us to observe as an outsider, just like eavesdropping in a way. And that's what the frame is doing. Now, that's not to say that's what the artist intended. Molly Bang tells us that's the effect it has on our reading. And here you can see that the girl is secure on the left, looking down at a book, looking backwards. I love this little perhaps Alice in Wonderland illusion here, who knows. And then the boy is looking down, he looks bored, his hands in his pockets. He's on the right hand side, that area of risk and adventure. And they're separated by this iron bar here too. So there's lots of little things going on there, you know, space to separate them, a bar to separate them, who knows. But it's the frame we're focusing on here. So we're there to watch what's going on rather than be a part of it. Here it is again in Max. So yes, frames within frames. So there's no black outline around this, but the frame is smaller, which pushes us further apart. And for me, I always look at this going, yeah, Max doesn't want us there yet. He's not ready to have us. So the small frame is a way of saying you can watch from afar. And actually, I don't know if I'd want to be with Max at the moment. He looks a bit too cross. So we're watching from a distance. However, when there is what we call a bleed, and Jane Doonan tells us in a book that a bleed is where the image goes to all the edges of the paper, then it's the IMAX experience. It's the, I think Mobius calls it the total experience, which is a better way of putting it, but I like the IMAX. A bit like an important on the virtual goggles and being in it, and that's that whole emotional investment. And if we were all in a room together, when you turn that page and see that page for the first time, you do kind of get a whoosh approach. It's so difficult on a PowerPoint to get that feeling across, but this is a double spread, so the pictures are on both pages, and it's a full page bleed double spread kind of thing going on. And that's the whole join in with the rumpus. We want you to experience this. And I love these pages because they're such showpieces and they engage us emotionally so strongly. And here it is done beautifully in Jabari Jumps by Gaia Cornwall. Jabari's on the left hand, bless little Jabari. He's been so nervous about jumping off the springboard. Down here is his dad and his little sister. And they've come to an outdoor swimming pool, and Jabari's like, I'm going to do the jump. And he's so nervous. He's not sure he wants to do it. He can swim. He knows he can swim. And here we can like feel that anticipation with him. You know, he's safe, he's on this side, but he's looking at this great, beautiful expanse. And, you know, is he going to do it? And this bit where he goes, I love surprises, he whispered. It kind of really gives me goosebumps because, you know, it's that nervousness about going on top. Yeah, that's beautifully put, actually. Whoever says, you know, he's on top of the world, but he's that nervousness. And then here, this full great drama in Father by Graham Baker-Smith. So there's lots going on here. There's lots to do with height and positioning, but you can see the mother and the son and the dog of positioned very securely and low in the far left. And then you've got the person here coming to pick up the father, and the father here in that very anxious space. There's lots of bumps and rocks, and here they've got this smooth plinth here that they're standing on, and you've got this dramatic seascape and little bits of blue. This is an incredible picture, but such an experience. Again, think about position, but think about how it would feel turning over that page and being a part of this moment. So that's what frames where the pages, the ends of the paper themselves are doing. They're kind of that immersive experience. And then Anthony Brown, man, so clever. We then use frames to tell a different part of the story. So this is Voices in the Park, and I've read this book to kids and students for donkey's years, and every time I read it, something new happens. And this is my claim about Picturebooks, one word, that every time you read them, something new comes up. So in this one, we've got, I keep forgetting is it Peter? Albert's the dog's, and it's awful. I remember the dog's name in this, but I don't remember the boy's name. This is his story, and someone's going to type it in for me, I hope. But we can see here that we've got the black Charles. Thank you so much, Roy. We've got the black line here underneath in Charles's world, and we've got, you can't see it, but there's a black line here and here. And this is Charles's side of the world. And he's looking over at Smudge, and look at the edge of Smudge's world. No black frame. Now, what is the frame then telling us, I think, about how he conceptualizes the world that Smudge is living in compared to his? Does he feel boxed in? Because this is what frames can do. And does her life seem boxed in? And how about here? We're in Charles's world. And you can see the black frame goes all around the edge, but not where the slide breaks free from the frame. Where the slide breaks free, the black edging is gone. And he's got that big, come on, Charles, you can do it kind of thing. There's Smudge behind him, encouraging him, but it's that anticipation, but it's high up, that nervous energy and excitement. Will he do it? Of course he will. And what happens if, in the words of Freddie Mercury, we want to break free? Well, breaking free from the frame is breaking that fourth wall. Now, I can't remember if these pictures are from Molly's book, or if I've kind of adapted what they've got, but the wolf certainly is. I love this wolf in Molly's book. But what happens when we're breaking free from a frame? That's another thing that we can do. We know that this can be a liberation and escape for the character. And here it is in one of my all-time favorites of all time, Shirley Hughes's Wordless Up and Up. This is such a good book. Who was I speaking to? Library Mice, Twitter on Library Mice. She's written this incredible blog about Up and Up. Go read it. But in here, you can see these tall frames where we've got the little girl who can fly, looking down at the adults that don't like the fact that she can fly, especially this scientist here. He's come with his net, treating her like some sort of butterfly, refusing to believe the fact that she can do what she can do. You've got some outraged, bald-hatted chap here. You've got some young youth here looking at, finding it hilarious, and everyone else is nervous. But we're looking down, looking at her, who's looking down, looking at him. So there's lots of power play going on here, but she quite happily says, well, if you're coming up, I'm going to break out of the whole story. And off she goes, breaking free from the frame. Which is brilliant. And then, of course, the ultimate frame-breaking book is David Wiesner's The Three Pigs, where it's one of these semi-wordless texts. Actually, it's not wordless at all. There's loads of words in it, but I know what's going on here. So you've got one narrative, which is the written narrative in the story of the Three Pigs, and that's always pretty much within the frame. And you've got the wolf who's coming to blow down the house of the Three Pigs. And here we go, the wolf huffed and he blew the house in, but this time with the story, the wolf blows so hard that the pig gets blown out of the frame. Look, it's beautiful, look at this. So you can see he's just over the edge here. And while he's in the frame, he looks like one type of pig. You can see here, that's a different drawing of the pig. And when he bumps out the frame, he's hyper-realistic, looking down at where he's gonna fall. And he's like, hey, he blew me right out of the story. So breaking free from the frame here and ate the pig up. And what's obviously happening here is the words and the pictures are telling two different stories. This is such a good book to use in any year group, but certainly it is a great advocate for picture books in secondary schools as well. And then here we go later on. The pigs go into lots of different stories, Matrix style, you know, when Neo kind of breaks out and he's in that white room and he's like, give me guns, and all the guns come. Well, this is similar to what this place, you know, you've got the white space of the empty narrative, and suddenly you've got lots of different stories going on, and the pigs jump into stories and pull out people that they want to be part of their story friendship group, like the dragon and the cat down here. And they think, oh, now that we know how stories work, we're going to uncrumple all these stories and fix it so that we're in control. So they're literally moving and playing with frames, which I think is incredible. I'll try and answer that question at the end. So from that, we're looking at frames as gates and as doors and as roads and as windows, and Mobius talks about stairs too. So when we have an open gate or a closed door, an open door or a road, I think, is it The Day the War Came, that was written by Nicola Davis and illustrated by, someone type it in because I can't remember, I'm so sorry. But there's that beautiful road that's guiding our kind of, thank you, Rebecca Cobb, I should know that. The road guiding our vision. So those can guide us towards new beginnings or shows that they've stopped. So Maurice Sendak's famous for saying about the fact that he likes open windows in his stories because it's a sense of something new and adventure, and he likes moons in his stories too. So the open window means we're going somewhere new. Max can take us somewhere new. We had Yoshio with the open door, a new adventure. And then this is one of my all-time favorite picture books. This is the book that I use to talk about codes at Reading Rocks with, the first one. Here we've got a dog looking back at a closed door, and we've got an elderly lady, Rose, looking out at an open window. And here we've got lines and curves, everything going on. But generally we use closed doors as closed opportunities, and we've got open windows as open opportunities. And then the right and the round is when frames are different shapes. So they might be rounded and soft. So do you remember that picture earlier of Bigu where she was looking dejected, and I think it was like 3 or 4 frames on 2 levels. And then this is the next frame where she's happier. Look, her ears are pricked up and she seems to have found some school children to play with. And there's lots going on here, but we're kind of sensing how she feels in this moment because the frame is soft, it's mimicking her color too. So this feels like a nice frame, a frame full of hope maybe. And mini grain uses the classic, I always think of the Beano when we've got these kind of curved edges, you know, the thought bubbles in comics or the memory bubbles. And this is a memory. But this feels soft and rounded and inviting too. It seems like a nice place. And although it seems like a nice place here, when I've added a thick black frame, it feels, well, it feels separate. I don't feel as I can connect to it as much as this one. So this idea of this kind of whole curved frame that's more inviting than this kind of straight frame. And that comes a lot when we talk about the next moment, which is lines and shape and capillarity. I hope we're doing all right so far. We're doing good on 10 more minutes left. Crikey. Okay. I'll have another drink and move on. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I haven't even looked at like the chat for a little while. So, moving on. So line, shape and capillarity. So Molly Bang again, and lines and sharp things. So Molly writes a couple of beautiful pages giving examples. This is one of the pictures where she talks about, look, as humans, we've learned not to touch sharp things. They're dangerous, they hurt us, so we don't pick them up. The Rules of Summer by Sean Tam shows us lots of sharp things. The two boys here are in an area that we don't feel very comfortable with, probably wouldn't want to be here. And some of that is down to these kind of sharp kind of columns peering out of the ground. And then we've got curved environments and curved shapes and how welcoming they are. Curved means cuddly, means wholesome. Obviously, it's very primal and is why we like rounded shapes. We're moving on, but you get the idea. And that's me copying the background in Deborah King's Cloudy, which Jane Doonan calls on a lot in her book. So she uses this a lot to talk about how pictures work really well. But you can see the hill, the kind of the roll of the hills is taking us up, but it feels warm and secure, even though there's a big thunderstorm coming. Here's a character that's full of rounded shapes. It's a gorgeous picture, isn't it, by Alexis Deacon. If anyone knows Alexis Deacon and is watching this, please tell him to come back and carry on doing picture books. But you can see here that Bigu is surrounded by puppies, but even the edges of the box are quite kind of bendy and curved rather than stiff. And so when we see curved characters, we feel that it's a really nice place to be. And we want to cuddle these characters too. And this is Emily Hughes' incredible Wild. And you can see that this girl is, she's been brought to stay with two psychiatrists. And we can see that if you look really closely, there's no real nice rounded shapes on them or her. We're in a world of sharp lines really around her. You can see that there's lots of lines around the female character here. And it's to give, and underneath you can see that, you know, the rug is full of these lines too, as is this chap here on the bench. And this is to show, lines show this sense of kind of angry energy or blocking or frustration. And vertical and parallel lines and horizontal lines can be used in different ways to guide or restrict. So here we've got Red, again, this is a Molly Bang picture, in the woods, but it feels like she's trapped. And this is mirrored beautifully in Anthony Brown's Gorilla, where there's a girl sat in bed looking at Gorilla sad, and she's separated from her gorilla by the frame. I remember doing this in year 5, and there was a girl who was a real non-writer, didn't enjoy writing. We'd read this book and talked about this picture and how it felt. And she wrote this incredible passage. She was writing a kind of realism story about a relationship with her dad, a made-up story. And she talked about the girl running upstairs and holding onto the bed frame, iron bars of bed frame, and putting her head in between the bars and crying. I can remember it being a really emotive reading experience for me. And she was in the ICT suite typing, and I'd read it during lunch afterwards, and I'd asked her about, that was a really powerful piece, you know, a really strong image. And she goes, oh yeah, it stuck with me when we were talking about the prison in this picture. So it just goes to show that the language around the toolkit to talk about pictures, children can take and use in their writing in some way if we spend time looking at these things. So here's an example of Red moving, trying to move through the forest, but a tree is fallen. This is a Molly Bang picture again to block her. And here it is used in Gorilla, where we've got lines to show a sense of not being able to move on. There's lots of things going on here. We can't read the poor elephant's face because of the handrail, the rail on the side. And you've got the lines at the top blocking us too. And also there's a sense that this to me is the way out, and it's too big. So Brown's playing with perspective. So lots of straight lines can feel constrictive and stop, or they can show fragmented thinking, as they do here in Sydney Smith's Small Inner City. So you've got this kind of breakage of the image of the young child here walking across the city streets, and it's a reflection in you know, a building of some sort, but you can see that the picture you know, mimics or complements really what's being said here. It can make your brain feel like there's too much stuff in it, and that's the sensation I get in this image too, that's what it's complementing, this fragmented thinking. And then finally in this section is capillarity. I think I'm going to end on some time. So capillarity is when we have lots of lines crossing over each other, and again that's a sense of nervous energy. So we can see it here again in Wild. You can see under the rug there's all these angry lines to show this nervous energy that's going on, and then Sydney Smith employs it here in Town is by the Sea. Everything seems happy on top of the table. Mum seems happy. There's a little sister here getting cuddled up by her, and the boy's talking to his dad who's been at the mines all day. But underneath the table, there's this kind of dark, angry shadow, which is scratchy and wild. And you have to think, Doonan talks about like every line in an illustration counts. So when you look at things like this, you have to think, why did Sydney Smith put this in? He could have left it and it could have been blank underneath and it would have worked. We don't need the shadows. There's no shadows anywhere else. So why do it here? And is it about this underlying tension between the family and the nervousness of dad going mining every day? And, you know, is this what mum is feeling? Is this what dad's feeling? Is this what they're all feeling? The thing that they can't talk about. And then here it is in Where the Wild Things Are, again, where you've got what's called cross-hatching, this crisscrossing of lines in the background, on the wall, and on the floor, on a banister here, and in the picture. And again, it's Max's energy kind of being contained, and he needs to release it all. And the poor dog's had enough. You know what happens when you go from right to left. He's trying to escape back into the beginning of the story because he's had enough. But you can see that his doorway, there's no door blocking him. It's smooth. This is a place where there's no anxious energy at all. So that's why the dog is heading in that direction. And finally, we're going to talk about colour. Now, it used to be, when I did this at The Guardian and at Reading Rocks, I used to say, oh, you know about colour, you know, red is associated with blood, so it's, you know, anger, or it's love and romance. It's anything that gets the blood pumping. Blue can be down, but really I don't think that's good enough. So when I went back and read Molly's book and Mobius's article, I realised it was a lot more complicated than that. And so here we go. So I want my hat back by the incredible John Classen. This was a thread earlier on Twitter, wasn't it, a couple of weeks ago, where people are asking about the use of red. Red here to show that kind of realization and that anger about he's worked out what's happened. You can see that Bear is looking back. He's looking back going, oh my goodness, I completely remember what's gone on. If he was flipped the other way, it would feel quite different. But the red in the background there is to show the realization and the anger at someone's lied to him, so to say. And here it is employed in a place to call home, where the little cute kind of furry beasts, hamsters or guinea pigs or something, are trying to find a new home and escape. And suddenly they sense this great danger with this dog that's this kind of great beast. He's got written here, a beast. And he's in this kind of lampshade and the dog's carrying him, this little guy here, so cute. But the dog's taking him across and it's the kind of shock or the, oh no, we don't, you know, the sense of danger that the red is showing us. But the dog, look, he looks quite happy, really. So that's fine. And again here, we've got the opposite, okay? So we've got the sense of blue, feeling down, a coldness, that's being employed here in Gorilla. And as if to emphasize the coldness, of course, what's behind Dad? A fridge or a freezer of some sort. So that's to kind of show that coldness. And you now know, having joined on the journey with me, that also that clinical use of lines also means that there's no sense of belonging or being or warmth in this picture in lots of different ways. And here Anthony Brown employs it again in The Night Shimmy, where Eric is angry. And there's that storm in the background, very angry Arthur, a little bit not now Bernard as well, but we're using that colour blue. And then Remy Charlip uses it so well, unfortunately, in this picture book, where he uses bright colours to indicate joy and happiness, and he uses grey colours, you know, I'm feeling a bit down again, I'm feeling a bit grey, or black colours to indicate kind of a disappointment. So we've got, fortunately, one day Ned got a letter that said, please come to my surprise party, and on the next page, but unfortunately, the party was in Florida and he was in New York. So playing with colour there. And then finally, Sydney Smith again, he uses colours to connect. He uses little glimpses of colour throughout a picture book say, think about why these colours connect. So this is the girls' world. I realise I've got 1 minute left. Different variances of colour here to catch our attention, blues and pinks and yellows, these warm colours associated with the natural world. And you can see that for readers, there's connections here. There's the red of her coat, a bit like our red that's taken us through this journey today, but also these floral, warm, natural colours. Why is it that Sydney Smith is trying to draw our attention to some elements over others? I think they're the interesting things. So it's 9 o'clock. That went pretty well in terms of timing. There are 4 elements here that are worth considering. I would have talked about if we had more time. So relationships between words and pictures, the peritext, which is like the title page, the end papers, what they're doing, connections between other books, and then a whole session on Jane Doonan's work would be fascinating. There's 2 links I want to give you before I end. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I just went really quick. And yes, I will try very quickly to do the Q&As for Nikki as well. Basically, what I'm saying is I'll carry on talking, but it's 9 o'clock, guys, and if you've got to go, it's absolutely fine. But if I just click here very quickly and take those people to a Padlet that I created a couple of years ago when I first joined Oxford Brooks, which has got students' plans up. If we click on Cherry Blossom and Paper Planes by Abby Portway. So Abby has now got a job. Congratulations, Abby. She's going to go teaching. But over the years, I just want to show you that these students have been applying these codes and principles in reading pictures in the book that they've been looking at, as well as doing it. So you can see here's her talking about position and size and talking about perspective and viewpoint. And lots of you have asked, you know, why did they do that? What are they doing it for? Where's it come from? Well, hopefully I've showed where it's come from. And hopefully you'll see that it shows how long you could spend on a picture book. So I often I remember talking to Martin Galway once about you can read a picture book quite quickly, and I didn't mean that at all, and he rightly told me off. But if you're going to read a picture book slowly and closely, it can take hours and hours and hours to read a picture book. But there's hundreds of plans on here where the students have been applying the skills or the tools, I should say. So if you want to use them, that's great. And then I've written a blog today, and a special, very special thank you to Book Ireland and Library Mice and Mary Roach and Nick for supporting me on making sure that this is all clear and safe and things like that. So this is pretty much the breakdown of everything that I've been saying tonight. These are all my own words and work. Obviously the pictures aren't mine. I've used all of them, but I've said at the bottom, you know, you can read it. There's links here to where I talked about these things earlier. The handout is here. If you ever want to cite what I've done or anything like that, is here. But every book that I've used is here. I said lots of here, haven't I? And then at the end of this post, you can see there's all the books that I use here. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to look at some of the Q&As and see if I can get through them before you all go. If you've gone, I'm so sorry I haven't looked at the chat. I'll try and get back to it. I can't believe there's been 300 of you plus here keeping me company, you wonderful people. That's so, so kind of you. Okay, so Sophie, list of books, yes. What picture book do you think is a great read for the first week of your class? Goodness gracious me, what a question. Any book from that Padlet, there we go. Any of those books would be fantastic. But I would say any book that you really enjoy that you think is suitable for the children. There's a lot to be said for you being passionate about a book, and a lot to be said for the difficulty of working with books that you aren't passionate about, and that can happen. Can we have another section on session on peritext? Sure. Can I get back to you about when? But yeah, it's so cool. I really like those elements and how they help tell the story. Do you have any ideas for activities and our lessons for picture books, or could point us in the right direction of where to find some examples so that we can get the most from picture books? Yes. So Jane Doonan's picture book talks to you about this, looking at pictures in picture books. At the back, she kind of gives you a breakdown on how she employs using picture books. Remember that my Padlet has loads of plans that have ideas. I'm very happy to think about different ways of doing it, but hopefully that toolkit, that was a link at the bottom of the blog, will give you some ideas of how to have discussions, but really they should be just parts of whole class reading or guided reading, however you want to do it, and open up these discussions. Okay, what are the best picture books to read to children in the Zoom meeting? Picturebooks. So Picturebooks, one word, where there's gaps between the words and the pictures, I guess. We were asking the other night how to do this. As long as it's private, it's absolutely fine. I have done a video on my YouTube channel about using Padlet to put up pictures and get children talking about what's going on in the pictures. And I've done that with schools in the past, and it's a really successful thing, especially while we're all distance learning and distance teaching. So you could go and watch that video. You can always DM me on Twitter if I haven't answered your question really well. Hi Matthew, can you recommend a book that details Mobius's theories that you talked about here? Thanks for great soon. Yes, I can. This book. You can't get the original article, which is in Word and Image. You can try and buy it, but it's so difficult. But Mobius's article is in this book, Children's Literature. It's in the references list at the bottom. I'm not surprised that kids have nightmares or all these hidden messages going on. I would imagine some people pick up on the tension and meaning. Absolutely possible. Is there? Yes, there is. I think it's in my list of books. I will. Whoever's asked that question, ask me again on Twitter, because there is a book. It's called something like Children Reading Pictures. And don't want to say who it is, I don't want to get it wrong. It's Evelyn Arazipa, I think that's how you say it. Sorry, Evelyn, if that's how you, and then Mark Styles, maybe. Teresa Crimmel will definitely know. Someone will know in this group. That's an incredible book on how children interpret pictures. Let's have a look. How would you go about prompting students primarily discuss areas of level size? Open questions, I'm assuming you don't have them out. Yeah, I mean, Jill, the question around that would be, a bit like when you're getting ready for a guided reading session, you might have some questions that you want to use to prompt a discussion. You know, why do you think someone's placed there? And what do we think about why the author might have used this frame? So a book that's really good on kind of why questions and how to have critical thinking questions are Mary Roach's book, which might be in the list. It's certainly on the blog. And Fiona Main's book. And there's a very good book called Guiding Readers, Layers of Meaning, or Layers of Reading, sorry, which comes up with great ways of building up questions. And really, just as part of your comprehension repertoire, you can use some of those questions to support that. But start light touch, start doing it yourself, really, or with a group of people. Hi, Matt, thanks for doing this. What's your view on whether children need to see the book up close? Do you think on screen is okay? While we're doing this, okay, so if it was distance learning, absolutely on the screen. If it's in the classroom, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because if you can afford multiple copies of the book, brilliant. If you can't, maybe having a picture up on the screen is fine, because you're sharing it privately. And certainly my experience is having pictures up on the screen with them all on the carpet can be really engaging. I think I mix and match whichever picture I want to focus on. So the one we were going to talk on earlier with the Anthony Brown one with the girl with her hands behind her back, that's a great stopping point in Gorilla, but some pictures don't always invite longer stopping points, so it's up for you to think, hey, I think a lot's going on here. Please, for the love of Cliff, share the Padlet. Yes, it's available. I think when we've finished, it will be in my Twitter profile at the top, so you can go there. Thank you, and I'm so glad that you want to use it. It's all free, and none of it's my work. It's all the students' work and their plans that they do as their final assignment for me in year 3. How much detail? Okay, Rich, that's a good question. I wouldn't kill it at all. Do you know when you're kind of looking at a moment in a text or a narrative, I think you kind of know when you're digging too far and you're draining the potential and the joy of it. And it's start lightly and really, you know, let the children drive the narrative. This is the thing about dialogic teaching, dialogic reading and dialogic discussions, is finally when the children start taking charge of the conversation, they can go on and on and on. A good example, and it was when Joe Staples, who was in, hello Joe, was in this chat, is using Voices in the Park. When I used it with children in year 6, it was in the afternoon, it's 1 o'clock, and we were working towards some piece of writing. Joe ended up doing some incredible work with that, actually. I hope she talks about it with year 6s and talking about their stories. But when I used it and we just did a close read as a class, we spent the entire afternoon talking about the book and we didn't finish. And at no point did I sense any of the children were flagging, with little breaks for drinks and things. At no point did I sense the children were flagging. It was as if they were were liberated because they realised they were allowed to talk, they were allowed to share their opinions. I realised we couldn't get away with this now. It's a long time ago. But what I learned about that is if you give children the space, you can sometimes steer or guide some of the conversations, but you don't always have to lead it. Often conversations are stronger when the children are given that space to lead it themselves. Do you have any knowledge of the writing process for pitch books that are illustrated by 2 different people? Tim. Oh, I don't know if I do. I probably do, but DM me and I'll think about that. Just interested. I can't think of it because of anything that's be tricky. Collaborations are must with reading pitch books. Had the same experience as you, Matt, but voices and part. Lovely. And I think this is what's great about the best pitch books. So thank you very much. Gosh, 100 of you, like 250 of you stayed. Incredible. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm sorry I haven't even spoken to you about this whole thing for hosting Books Near Bedtime. I'll try and catch up everything that's going there. Obviously, a shout out to Nikki, who's looked after me throughout this whole thing, and especially to you guys for making this happen. I've just really, I'm really grateful that you've given up your time this evening for that. If you'd like any more, let me know, but they're probably going to be in long gaps, but I'm sure I can probably do something. Thank you so much and have a really, really nice evening, maybe looking at some pitch books. And remember, if you're going to buy any book, then you know, get Molly's or get Jane's book. Anyway, take care. Thank you so much. And we're going to stop the video now.